Good morning, friends. Welcome to Gyan channel. The topic for today's class is media and gender. Let's begin with the perspectives on stereotyping. Gentlemen, we live in a world which is becoming a global village in which information and communication attract people's attention more than even before. Our desire to communicate with strangers or our relationship with them depend on the degree to which we are effective in communicating with them. So, what is the definition of stereotypes? The stereotypes simply mean cognitive representations of another group that influence our feelings towards members of that group. Lippmann in 1922 refers to stereotypes as pictures in our heads. He points out stereotypes have both a cognitive and affective component. The stereotypes are therefore highly charged with feelings that are attached to them. There are two aspects of stereotypes. If we can make accurate stereotypes, then our cultural level predictions about strangers' behavior can also be accurate. To some extent, people's assumption to others leads to stereotypes. The accuracy of our predictions depends on whether the traits that we include in our stereotypes of another group are similar in the ones in that group's stereotype of its own group. If the traits we apply to another group agree with the traits members of the group apply to themselves, our stereotypes should lead to accurate interpretations of the behavior of members of the group who are typical. When we place someone in a category, our stereotype of people in that category help us predict his or her behavior. In other words, we are able to reduce our uncertainty because we assume that our stereotypes tell us how typical group members communicate. Inaccurate stereotypes often lead to misunderstanding. In Houston and Gill's model, miscommunication is framed as the result of inaccurate negative stereotyping, using the dissolution of group relationship. As for this point, we tend to use group identities to crystallize into recognizable patterns of communicative behavior, but very often features of others' communicative behavior styles are judged inappropriately. Ronan says that one's religion, mother tongue, culture, one's education, class, sex, skin color, even one's height, age, and family situation are all potentially unifying factors. But the cues we use are not always accurate ways to categorize others. Individual members of a group may or may not fit a stereotype we have of that group. If we categorize strangers who so not identify strongly with their ethnic group and who do identify strongly with their culture on the basis of their ethnicity, our prediction will probably be inaccurate. That will cause inaccurate stereotypes. For example, compared with American people, English people are considered cold and not very open. Making friends with them takes a long time. They like a certain distance when talking, etc. But things usually turn out to be much more complex. For example, include a large number of traits in the stereotype and differentiate subgroups with the group being stereotyped. To sum up, even if others are typical members of the group in which we categorize them, the inferences we make about them on the basis of their group membership may not be accurate. There are two reasons for it. One is that our stereotypes may not be valid. The other reason is that the group membership we are using to categorize them may not be affecting their behavior in the current situation. Furthermore, if we rigidly hold our stereotypes and are not willing to question them, we can never reach the point where we know strangers as individuals, and our attributions about an individual's stranger's behavior will continue to be incorrect. What are the problems of stereotypes and what are their solutions? Stereotypes may lead ineffective communication when we communicate with strangers. We therefore unconsciously try to confirm our expectations when we communicate with strangers. Our stereotypes constrain strangers' patterns of communication and engender stereotype confirming communication. In other words, stereotypes create self fulfilling prophecies. Generally, the greater our cultural and linguistic knowledge, and the more our beliefs overlap with those of the strangers with whom we communicate, the less the likelihood there will be misunderstandings. To increase our accuracy in making prediction, we must try to understand which social identity is guiding strangers' behavior in a particular situation. And to be effective in communication with strangers, we must keep our minds open and be mindful. Since stereotypes are a natural product of the communication process, they influence the way we process information. Stereotyping is the result of our tendency to overestimate the degree of association between group membership and psychological attributes, which there may be some association between group membership and psychological characteristics of members. It is much smaller than the we assume when we communicate an automatic pilot. So we turn to process information that is consistent with our stereotypes, and our stereotypes do not change. To have objective cognition on the information of strangers, we can process all the information available to us if we are mindful of our communication. Our tendency to stereotypes automatically is enhanced when we are highly anxious. Wilder in 1994 points out that when anxiety distracts persons from careful attention to the environment, they rely more on cognitive structures such as social stereotypes in making judgments of others. What is gender? Now we will discuss about gender inequality and sexism. Gender stereotyping presents a serious obstacle to the achievement of real gender equality and feeds into gender discrimination. Gender stereotypes are perceived preconceived ideas whereby males and females are arbitrarily assigned characteristics and roles determined and limited by their sex. Gender inequality pervades the world. In considering the dimensions of economic gender inequality, women still make less than men in the formal work sector, are more likely to live in poverty, are less likely to participate in the formal work sector, and do a larger share of work in the household sector. The dimensions of political gender inequality include women's lower representation in elected office and lower representation in political and corporate appointments. Causes of gender inequality. First is uneven access to education. Next is lack of employment equality. Next, job segregation, lack of legal protections, lack of bodily autonomy, poor medical care, lack of religious freedom, lack of political representation, racism, societal mindsets. Let's discuss about the types of inequalities. First, women work longer than men. In most of the societies, the male stream is the mainstream who argues that women have comparative advantage in household non-market production like cooking and cleaning for the family that can be called emotional and personal caring work. Based on this thinking, household jobs are then asymmetrically distributed. Women are more valued in home, men are specialized in market-based production. Thus, being the bread earners, male enjoy both power and status. Second is inequality in employment and earnings. As women household responsibilities, they tend to work mostly in a narrow range of occupations called female industries, textile, clothing, electronics, food and beverages, etc., where wages are usually lower than in other industries. Since these jobs are regarded as inferior in status to male jobs, women are differentially paid, leading to the gender wage gap. Ownership inequality. A case of social inequality, let's turn to another kind of inequality called ownership inequality. A classic case of social inequality in most of the societies, ownership over property and means of production rests mainly on male members. Next is survival inequality. And the crudest form of gender disparity is the unusually high mortality rates of women, though biologically women live longer than men. Thus, more boys than girls are born everywhere, leading to a deficit of women and surplus of men. Next is gender inequality in freedom of expression. In some backward, poor society, the right of women giving opinion is completely denied. Such unfreedoms, however, are not uncommon even among the educated elites who enjoy enormous power and authority in the male dominated society. Historically, this sort of low socio-economic status of women has been continuing nowadays. Next is gender inequality in respect of violence and victimization. Anti-female bias starts before the girl child is born, and this attitude of the society a female member carries throughout her life. It is because of the unequal sharing of income, property, household benefits, women are subject to both physical and sexual violence, the opposite of freedom and an extreme form of coercion. Let's discuss about what is sexism. Sexism is prejudice or discrimination against a person or group based on their sex or gender. It primarily affects women and girls, and it is the root cause of gender inequality worldwide. Sexist acts include any that frame one sex or gender as inferior. Sexism can be conveyed in behavior, speech, writing, images, gestures, laws and politics, practices and traditions. The types of sexism. The sexism is categorized in several ways. It can be hostile, benevolent, ambivalent. It can operate on different level of society. Also, it can be institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Then let's discuss about gender representation in media. According to media theorists, representation refers to any model in any medium that defines a real aspect, say people, events, subjects, places, and cultural identities among countless abstract concepts. Such representation may be written, spoken, or expressed in moving pictures. In defining media representation, the end products are also considered through the construction of one's identity. For instance, an issue like gaze may consider how women look at images of women, men and women, or even women at men. An important point to note is that all texts are always constructed irrespective of how realistic they may appear. They do not represent mere recordings or reproduction of pre existing circumstances that are real. Due to this assumption, most people end up making modality judgments towards various representation through the media. Gender and media representation. Gender is arguably the basic element of identification commonly used to categorize human beings as men or women. Nevertheless, the concept of gender is also sensitive and of immense significance in discussing media representation. From a simple understanding, masculinity is associated with hard, tough, and sweetie issues, while feminine objects appear fragrant, fragile, and soft. Common objects represented with either a masculine or feminine touch, including but not limited to smartphones, running shoes, bottleware, an airline, and a sports car. Media stereotyping. Stereotyping is not a new term in the media industry, especially with regard to how men and women are represented. In fact, stereotyping in media cannot be avoided and it is a common phenomenon in news, advertising, and entertainment industries. Notably, media stereotypes have a wide range of negative effects. For example, the manner in which men and women are represented may reduce their inherent differences into classes of people defined by simple traits. Similarly, stereotypes affect the manner in which people perceive life. In some cases, media stereotypes are used to erroneously justify some positions, say for leaders in power. This can be misleading to the public as they may adopt a misguided meaning of leadership and power. Based on this argument, media stereotypes have a significant impact on the society. Women and men representation in media. Under normal circumstances, one would expect the media to represent men and women positively. From TV shows to fashion magazines on the street, women have always been represented negatively. Almost every advert, whether for cars or food, carries the image of a woman. Popular female personalities appear to have peculiar features like extreme thinness, bleached skins, and always becoming younger in spite of their advanced age. It is viewed that economics of beauty play a major role. By insisting on an ideal figure, body size, and skin color, cosmetic and diet industries enhance continuity of their business as they have a ready market. In order to achieve these extreme and unattainable standards, most women resort to unhealthy eating habits like induced vomiting, skipping meals, or even opting for diet aids. Magazines, movies, and television emphasize the need for ladies to have a thin body, associating with the health, prosperity, love, and happy life. Besides body image, media represents women as sex objects. TV, movies, and magazines carry ads which imply that a woman's body is supposed to be sexually active and attractive. In terms of professionalism, women are underrepresented. Mainstream media concentrates on having men as main news presenters, while women are allowed to report on minor issues like domestic violence and accidents. Are men exempted from negative representation? The truth is that men are differently represented in the media. In most cases, men are seen to be in control of others, aggressive, physically appealing, and financially stable. This representation has far reaching implications on the society as boys and men assimilate what that they consume from the media into their daily lives. They therefore tend to be in control of every situation in life and may resort to aggression in cases where they find resistance, emulating how male characters carry themselves in media. Male stereotypes in media are grouped into five classes as follows. Joker represents men as people who lack seriousness, while the jock flights in life and finds approval of the eyes of men. On the other hand, the strong, silent type portrays a decisive man who is always in control. The big shot denotes a professionally, socially, and economically stable man. Profession of social dreams like wealth and power. Lastly, the action hero man is angry and violent. All these representations affect the manner in which the society perceives men, how men define their position in the society, and how boys define masculinity. As a major marketing tool, advertising ought to communicate the intended message in the most appropriate manner. As a result, men and women can be used in wooing customers in the business world in a positive way. However, researchers affirm that most ads designed for men are common during sports shows. Accordingly, women are rarely featured, with stereotypes taking center stage among the few that are considered. In extreme cases, women are represented as gifts given to men who have the capacity of choosing the best products in the market. With regard to beer commercials, most ads carry slim and white men who attract women. Additionally, adverts represent men as powerful and masculine. They therefore dominate while women are stereotypically portrayed as slender and special diet. This approach has negative impact on society through emulation of certain traits by people who feeds on media content. Now we discuss our patriarchy, social structures, and feminism. Patriarchy is the prime obstacle of women's advancement and development. Despite differences in levels of domination, the broad principle remains the same, that is, men are in control. The nature of the control may differ, so it is necessary to understand the system which keeps women dominated and subordinate and to unravel its workings in order to work for women's development in a systematic way. In the modern world, where women go ahead by their merit, patriarchy creates obstacles for women to go forward in society. Because patriarchal institutions and social relations are responsible for the inferior or secondary status of women, patriarchal society gives absolute priority to men and to some extent limits women's human rights also. Patriarchy refers to the male domination both in public and private spheres. In this way, feminists use the term patriarchy to describe the power relationship between men and women, as well as to find out the root cause of women's subordination. Social structure of patriarchy. The word patriarchy literally means that the rule of the father or the patriarch, and originally it was used to describe a specific type of male dominated family. The large household of a patriarch, which included women, junior men, children, slaves, and domestic servants, all under the rule of the dominant male. Now it is used more generally to refer to male domination to the power relationships by which men dominate women and to characterize a system whereby women are kept subordinate in a number of ways. Thus, patriarchy describes the institutionalized system of male dominance. Patriarchal ideology exaggerates biological differences between men and women, making certain that men always have the dominant or masculine role of women always have the subordinate or feminine ones. This ideology is so powerful that men are usually able to secure the appointment consent of every woman they oppress. A very important explanation for the origin of patriarchy was given by Frederick Engels in 1884 in his book The Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State. Engels believed that women's subordination began with the development of private property when, according to him, the word historical defeat of the female sex workplace. At the stage when private property arose to the society, men wanted to retain power and property and pass it on to their own children. To ensure this inheritance, mother right was overthrown. According to Engels, it was this period both patriarchy and monogamy for women were established. In this patriarchal system, different kinds of violence may be used to control and subjugate women. Such violence by men may even be considered legitimate, and women are always routinely experienced by male violence. Due to such violence, rape and other forms of sexual abuse, female forticide, dowry murders, wife beating, and continuous sense of insecurity that is instilled in women as a result keeps them bound to be home, economically exploited, and socially suppressed. Women and men become visible and invisible under different conditions in patriarchal culture. Women are invisible when they do something well, such as raising children into healthy adults or coming up with a brilliant idea at a business meeting. Men, on the other hand, become invisible when their behavior is socially undesirable and might raise questions about the appropriateness of male privileges. Similar points can be made about visibility and race or class. An African American man who has committed a violent crime is likely to be quite visible as yet another violent black man, though not visible as a violent man. In a patriarchal culture, there is a strong tendency to deny conflicts of interest between women and men despite obvious inadequacies in the allocation of responsibilities and scarce resources. Men in patriarchy is a social structure, not a conspiracy among men. It is not always intentional. Men need not intend to oppress women. Men too are subject to the enormous pressure of a social system that creates paths of least resistance consistent with patriarchy. What is the difference between patriarchy and feminism? The key difference between patriarchy and feminism is their treatment of women. In patriarchy, women face oppression and discrimination, whereas in feminism, women have equal rights to men. Patriarchy is a system of society or government in which men hold power and women are largely excluded from it. The main difference between patriarchy and feminism is the position of women. Women in patriarchy are under the control of men. They face oppression and are systematically disadvantaged, whereas feminism attempts to change the place of women in traditional societies by creating and protecting women's rights. In a patriarchal society, males are considered to be superior to females and they have supreme power in political, social, and economic spheres. However, feminism advocates that both males and females are equal. With this, we come to end of today's class. Thank you. Good